it's such a significant site, and to teach our children about what our grandparents and our ancestors have gone through in order to preserve our safety as you know, our safety as a society is just, it's critical.
The Lazaretto is a structure which is ingrained in the fabric of American life, and it should be preserved through whatever means necessary.
This is the oldest surviving quarantine station in the Western Hemisphere and the 6th oldest in the world, but incredibly, nothing had been written about the place, almost nothing.
I like to see history. I like to see history remain and to be preserved, and so that other people can see and feel what I have felt when I got here.
In 1793, a terrible epidemic of yellow fever devastated Philadelphia. In the space of a couple of months, roughly 10% of the city's population was wiped out. 5,000 people died of yellow fever in the late summer and early fall of 1793. This was an absolutely cataclysmic event, not only in the city's history, but in our nation's history. Philadelphia was the nation's capital. It was the largest seaport and largest city in the United States. The epidemic forced the government to leave town. The Board of Health, which was established in the aftermath of the 1793 epidemic, realized that the existing system of quarantine wasn't working. And it was thought that the old quarantine station, which was called the Marine Hospital, but also referred to as the Lazaretto, which was on Province Island, next to Fort Mifflin, right where the Schuylkill River empties into the Delaware, it was felt to be simply too close to the city to function effectively as a quarantine station. It was impossible to keep the ships under quarantine from having contact with the general population. So what was needed, the Board of Health felt, was a new quarantine station, bigger quarantine station, farther away from the city. And the best location they found was here in Tinicum Township, on the banks of the river. There's a deep enough anchorage for large ships. It was close enough to the city. The mail came several times a day. People could get to and from the city without too much trouble, but it would be much more difficult for people from the city to have uncontrolled access to the quarantine station.
My ancestors happened to come in on this site in 1804, and had a cousin who wrote the history of my relatives called Schweitzers, and that's how I found out about the site in the first place. I just love it, and I want to see more of the buildings. I would like to walk the same steps as they walked from the ship to the building and feel what they felt, and what is going to be my next step when I leave this building, and where am I going to go from here. And the fact that my ancestors were courageous enough to do that, I just totally admire them for doing it.
Humanity arrived at the Lazaretto yesterday, 118 black people without the least clothing being taken on board the schooner Phoebe, prize to the United States ship Ganges. The humane citizens are requested to send to the health office at the State House any kind of linen cloth for their accommodation, as well as to prevent the shock their decency will be exposed to so many of both sexes being thus exposed naked August 4th. That was my family's link of Africa to America. And this was where it began. And I had the opportunity today to share that with my only son. Just having gone through the experiences of a long journey on a ship to unfamiliar territory. And I often thought about how fearful that was for my ancestors, the people on the boat, to come to a new land, and how intimidating that must have been. But how courageous they were, because the individuals, my ancestors, when they got off the boat and were ultimately healed, moved into the American way of life and began to work and be productive, which is the dream for all Americans.
My father was an immigrant from Germany. He brought his full boat, which is a kayak, with him, and we started kayaking on the Delaware in front of this beautiful building in 1948. In those days, there were many boats on the river. The two outstanding buildings were the Corinthian Yacht Club and the Lazaretto building. That's what you noticed when you sailed by the river. And Corinthian had a fleet of about 25 sailboats, and they would sail in races 3 nights a week during the summer. And the seaplane base, which was located here, would have 15 planes, and then some evenings you might have 10 planes practicing takeoffs and landings.
I first came to the Lazaretto in either 1973 or 1974 when Bob Mills was running an aviation school here. I never did take the courses to learn how to fly, but that was my first experience here at the Lazaretto.
Approximately a year ago, this archway and steps were totally intact. As you can see, the past year we've had massive deterioration. The bricks have fallen out. They have now disappeared. This is indicative of the problems of the building as a whole. We're hoping to get matching funds and to restore the building to its luster, but unfortunately, until we do, this process will be ongoing.
The Lazaretto has several factors contributing to its demise. The rotting of the woods around the window frames, doors, etc., which is contributed by the leakage, etc. And we also have a big problem now with the airport coming in with their low-level flyovers, causing excessive noise to penetrate the building. That in itself can be detrimental to the overall sustainability of the building. We must address that issue immediately, for that matter.
This is a place of first defenders. These are the men and women who served here were first defenders against pestilence and disease. Today, the Lazaretto is a mothballed facility that's waiting for another mission, and I think that mission is yet to be designed.
I can fully appreciate the need for us to remember our past so that we understand where we've been, what sacrifices were made so that we got here, and that preserving the building helps us to hand something on to future generations. We see so many buildings just collapse from neglect, and in this case, this building is surrounded by people who don't even know it's here. And it really begs to have somebody take care of it.
This building is a part of the American dream. This building is part of the American story. People passed through here that became part of the fabric that we know as America. And we need to do a better job in America of telling the story.
Now's the time to figure out what we're going to do to repurpose the site. The future's open for this site, so the history of the site is still being written.
The Lazaretto was the first place, and sometimes the last place, people came to in America. We are fighting to preserve a great lady from an untimely demise. The dead are not truly dead until we forget them.
I live right there. I live up there.